Part 1. The Forgotten Origins. Before the first dawn rose upon the world, before the stars had names or the wind had a voice, there was only the great silence, an emptiness so vast that even time itself dared not cross it. In that boundless void, between the realms of fire and ice, lay the seed of all things to come. And within that seed, hidden in the frozen mists of eternity, was the whisper of a god, a wanderer who would one day be called Odin. No one can say when he began, for Odin's story is older than stories. It belongs to the first dreams of humankind, to the nights when firelight flickered upon cave walls and ancient tongues spoke of the unseen powers that shaped their fate. Long before the Norsemen carved runes into stone, the essence of Odin lived in older gods, skyfathers, stormbringers, and wise tricksters who watched the world with one unblinking eye. Across the ancient steppes, in lands where myth and migration intertwined, his spirit took shape. The Indo-European tribes who wandered from the east carried with them the first sparks of this divine archetype, the wise ruler, the seeker of hidden knowledge, the restless traveler between worlds. As centuries turned like great wheels, that spirit gathered faces and names. Among the peoples of the North, it became woven into the breath of their language, the rhythm of their seasons, the pulse of their fear and faith. In every storm that rolled across the horizon, in every raven that circled the fields of the fallen, they sensed his presence, the one who saw what others could not, who gave with one hand and took with the other. Odin, Woden, Wotan. Each name a reflection in the river of time, each a fragment of a god that refused to stay still. In those first ages, humanity looked upon the world and saw chaos, the raw, untamed forces that both nourished and destroyed. The people of the North told of Ymir, the giant born from the clash of fire and frost, whose body became the very bones of the earth. Yet even in that act of creation, there was violence, there was sacrifice. And from that sacrifice rose Odin and his brothers, Vili and Ve, carving order from the corpse of chaos. To understand Odin is to understand that everything he touches bears the mark of sacrifice, that knowledge, creation, and life itself are born through loss. The wind that sweeps across the empty plains carries the echo of his first breath. When Odin and his brothers shaped the first humans from driftwood, he gave them the gift of breath, of spirit, an act both divine and deeply human. In that moment, he became more than a god. He became the bridge between mortality and eternity, between flesh and fate. Every soul that inhales the cold air of the North carries unknowingly a trace of that first gift. But Odin was not content to rule from afar. Unlike the distant, silent gods of other faiths, he walked among men, cloaked, one-eyed, and unassuming. He was the wanderer at the edge of the firelight, the old man whose riddles revealed truths too sharp to touch. He moved through villages and forests, seeking wisdom in the hearts of warriors, poets, and outcasts. Some feared him, some followed him, yet all who met his gaze felt the same unease. For Odin's eye saw beyond the surface of things, into the tangled threads of destiny. To the ancient mind, Odin embodied contradiction. He was the god of war and the bringer of peace, the master of magic and the father of kings. He was both a creator and a destroyer, a scholar and a thief. And in this paradox lay his power. The people who told his stories lived in a world of uncertainty, a place where winter could starve a village and a single storm could erase generations. They did not worship gods who were perfect. They revered those who struggled, who sacrificed, who sought knowledge even at great cost. Odin was their mirror, flawed, cunning, noble, and ruthless. a reflection of the human condition itself. When men gathered around the fire to tell of him, their voices carried the rhythm of memory. They spoke of how he traveled across the 9 worlds, riding the great horse Sleipnir, born of chaos and cunning, swift as thought and silent as the grave. They spoke of his ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, who flew each morning to bring him news from every corner of creation. They spoke of the wolves who followed at his heels, of the endless hunger that gnawed at both beast and god alike. And above all, they spoke of the one eye, the other sacrifice to Mimir's well for the price of wisdom. What kind of god, they wondered, would give up half his sight just to see more clearly? Perhaps the kind who understood that true vision requires blindness, that only by losing one's eye to the depths can one glimpse the vastness of truth. For Odin's sacrifice was not merely of flesh, but of certainty. He gave up the comfort of knowing in exchange for the pain of seeking. And in doing so, he became the eternal wanderer, never satisfied, always yearning. To some, he was a patron of kings, whispering strategy and ambition. To others, he was the god of the dead, claiming the slain and guiding them to Valhalla. Yet beneath every story lay the same current. Odin was the embodiment of the human drive to understand the unknown, even when the pursuit leads into darkness. He was the spark of curiosity, the ache of imagination, the restless mind that refuses to accept the world as it is. Through the long centuries, the tribes of the North carried his name on their tongues and in their blood. As they crossed forests and fjords, as they built halls and sailed across seas, Odin walked with them. He was the whisper in the storm that filled their sails. He was the shadow at the feast that reminded them of death. And when the skalds, the poets, raised their voices, they did so in his honor, for he was the source of all poetry, all inspiration, all madness. The mead of wisdom that flowed from his lips was the same drink that filled the hearts of those who dared to dream. Yet even as his worship spread, Odin remained elusive. His face changed with every telling. To one tribe, he was the noble father of gods. To another, a trickster and manipulator. To the poets, he was the giver of inspiration. To the warriors, the chooser of the slain. And to the mystics, he was something far older, the nameless wanderer, who crosses boundaries no other god dares. In this ever-shifting form, Odin reflected the people who made him. He was not a fixed being, but a living myth, one that evolved as humanity did. When Christianity came to the north, Odin's image began to fade, yet he did not vanish. He sank deeper into the bones of language and the rhythm of stories. His day, Wednesday, Woden's Day, still marks the middle of our week. His wisdom lingers in the archetypes of scholars, wanderers, and prophets who seek truth beyond the veil of comfort. Even the modern world, with all its light, cannot fully banish him. He walks still in the restless curiosity of science, in the hunger of poets, in the ambition of those who strive to shape their own fate. Odin's hidden history is the story of humanity's oldest dream. The dream of becoming more than we are, of reaching beyond the horizon of knowledge, even when the price is pain. His legend is not just of gods and giants, but of the eternal struggle between ignorance and understanding. Every culture that has ever looked up at the stars and wondered why has in some way spoken his name. And so, as the cold winds whisper across the northern seas, we remember him, not as a relic of forgotten faith, but as a symbol of the unending quest for meaning. For the story of Odin is not confined to the past. It lives in every heart that seeks wisdom, in every mind that dares to question, and in every soul that walks the edge between light and shadow. The Allfather's journey is our own. Part 2. The Rise of the Allfather. Before the first dawn, Before the whisper of wind ever touched a leaf, there was only the void. Ginnungagap, the yawning emptiness, the space between fire and frost. It was here that Odin's story truly began. Though he was not yet Odin, not yet the one-eyed wanderer or the father of the gods, he was potential, sleeping in the bones of chaos, waiting for form, waiting for fire and frost to meet and bring the impossible to life. When the sparks of Muspelheim met the icy rivers of Niflheim, steam rose and coiled into clouds that shimmered like living breath. From that breath came Ymir, the first being, vast, ancient, neither god nor man but something in between. From Ymir's body, new life would spill like seeds scattered into the wind, and watching from the shadows of creation, unseen but inevitable, destiny began to weave itself into the shape of a god who would one day rule them all. It is said that Odin, along with his brothers Vili and Ve, came from the lineage of Buri, the one freed from ice by the licking of the cosmic cow Odinbla. A strange birth, one born of patience and persistence, a creature carved by time itself. From Buri came Bor, and from Bor came the three brothers who would reshape the cosmos. Among them, Odin was the thinker, the mind that saw beyond strength and beyond rule. He watched the swirling chaos of Ymir's world and saw not a monster, but raw material, the clay of existence waiting to be molded. And so it was that Odin and his brothers rose against Ymir, their ancestor, their creator. The great battle was one of mythic proportions, for how can one fight against that which gave birth to you? Yet, in the thunder of their rebellion, Ymir fell. From his blood came the oceans that filled the void. His bones became the mountains, his flesh the soil, his skull the vault of the sky. And from his eyebrows, the brothers built a fortress, Midgard, to protect the fragile spark of mortal life that would one day come to be. In that act of creation through destruction, Odin found his purpose. The cosmos was born not from harmony, but from the collision of opposites, death birthing life, chaos yielding order. This would become the rhythm of Odin's existence, his endless dance between creation and ruin. For him, wisdom would always demand sacrifice, and power would always taste faintly of sorrow. The three brothers looked upon the silent earth they'd shaped, and Odin felt something stir within him, a longing, a hunger that even creation could not satisfy. The world was beautiful, but it was empty. So they walked along the shores of a new sea, and there they found two fallen trees, ash and elm, washed up by the tides. They stood over them, these silent witnesses of the new world, and Odin bent low. He breathed into them the spark of life. A whisper that became a heartbeat. The ash became Ask, the elm became Embla, the first man and woman. In that moment, Odin became more than a maker of worlds. He became a giver of souls. The breath he gave was more than air. It was consciousness, curiosity, the fire that drives mankind to seek, to build, to question. It was his gift and his burden, for from that day forward, the fate of men and gods would be forever entwined. As the first humans looked up at the stars for the first time, perhaps they sensed it, the gaze of the one who had made them, the one who had given them thought. They would not know his name then, not yet, but in their dreams they might have seen a tall figure cloaked in gray, wandering the edges of their newborn world, his single eye gleaming like a distant sun. Odin watched his creation with pride, but also with unease. The humans were fragile, short-lived, and uncertain. Yet within them was something he recognized, a spark of defiance, a refusal to accept ignorance. He saw in them a mirror of himself. And so, while his brothers tended to the keeping of the world, Odin began his wandering, across the realms, through shadow and light, seeking the answers that even a god did not yet know. He walked among giants, spirits and creatures older than time. He spoke with beings who remembered before memory existed. Some say he ventured into the depths of Ginnungagap itself, standing where the fire and frost still met, listening to the silent hum of the universe's heartbeat. There, perhaps, he understood that knowledge was not something to be taken, but something to be paid for. And so began Odin's long path toward wisdom, a journey that would cost him everything he once was. The Allfather would not be born from victory, but from surrender, not from comfort, but from sacrifice. Each step he took away from creation was a step closer to becoming the god the world would one day know. But for now, the 9 realms were still taking shape. The great ash tree Yggdrasil grew from the depths, its roots stretching into realms of frost and fire, its branches touching the heavens. Upon its boughs perched eagles of wisdom, serpents of deceit, and beneath it, the wellsprings of fate began to flow. The world tree was a living map of existence, and Odin saw in it the blueprint of all things: life, death, rebirth. From the halls of Asgard to the mists of Niflheim. From the blazing walls of Muspelheim to the tranquil plains of Vanaheim, the cosmos pulsed with a new rhythm. The Aesir, Odin's kin, took their places as rulers of the new world. They built halls of splendor, forged weapons of power, and looked down upon creation with pride. Yet even in their glory, there was unease. For Odin's thoughts were never still. He spoke of hidden truths, of a web that connected all things, a web woven by the Norns, the weavers of fate, who even gods could not escape. While others celebrated, Odin watched. He listened, he questioned, for deep within his heart was the fear that the world they had made might one day crumble, that even the gods were not immortal, only temporary guardians of a cycle larger than themselves. And so, he sought knowledge wherever it hid. He went to the well of Urd, where the Norns tended their waters of fate. He listened to their whispers and heard fragments of destiny, a storm that would one day swallow the gods, a twilight called Ragnarok. The Norns spoke of endings, and Odin, instead of despairing, became obsessed. For if the end was written, could it be changed? That question would haunt him forever. He returned to Asgard a changed being. His brothers saw it in his eyes, the restlessness, the shadow of a secret too vast to share. Odin began to wander again, but now his journeys took him into the minds of men. He whispered to kings and warriors, taught them the laws of conquest and the art of wisdom. He became a god of war, of poetry, of death, for in every ending, he saw only another beginning. To the people of Midgard, he was both protector and deceiver, the one who blessed their victories and demanded their sacrifices. To some, he was the noble Allfather. To others, the dark Trickster who set them on paths of ruin for the sake of knowledge. And perhaps both were true, for Odin's nature was as vast and shifting as the cosmos itself. In time, Odin's name became a word carried on every wind, spoken with reverence and fear. He gathered around him gods of thunder and beauty, of love and war. He fathered sons who would inherit fragments of his nature, the strength of Thor, the cunning of Loki, the poetry of Bragi, the silent justice of Balder, each one a reflection of some hidden part of him, each one a story waiting to unfold. And yet, for all his might, Odin could never rest. The question of fate lingered like a splinter in his soul. He could build worlds, command gods, and shape men. But could he escape the destiny foretold by the Norns? Could he outwit the end? He would try. He would sacrifice. He would give more than any being before or since. But for now, as the light of creation settled into the first true dawn of the cosmos, Odin stood upon the walls of Asgard and looked out across the 9 realms, his realms, and whispered to the wind that had no answer, What is the price of forever? Part 3. Wisdom at a price. Odin did not walk alone, for the pursuit of wisdom is never solitary. Though he bore the weight of his sacrifices upon his shoulders, he moved among the living and the dead, the gods and the giants, seeking fragments of understanding wherever they might lie hidden. His journeys took him into places where mortals feared to tread, into forests older than memory, across mountains whose peaks pierced the clouds, and into the dark waters where the echoes of forgotten worlds lingered. Each step was deliberate, each encounter a mirror reflecting not only the nature of others, but the hidden recesses of his own being. Odin had become both observer and participant, simultaneously immersed in life and yet set apart, a god whose wisdom was as isolating as it was illuminating. He sought the counsel of the seers, those whose vision stretched beyond the veil of the present into the twisting corridors of fate. Many spoke in riddles, their words like fog drifting across a lake, yet in every syllable lay a seed of truth. Odin listened without haste, knowing that revelation is seldom instantaneous, that understanding often requires patience, discernment, and the courage to face what one finds. He recognized that the gift of insight could be as dangerous as it was powerful, for knowledge untempered by compassion or foresight can corrupt even the most noble of hearts. In one such encounter, Odin met a seeress in a hidden grove, her eyes clouded yet piercing, her presence both fragile and immense. She spoke of the threads of destiny, of paths converging and diverging like rivers cutting through stone. To know, she whispered, is to bear the weight of what must come, and yet what could be. Odin nodded, understanding that prophecy is not merely a gift, but a responsibility, a map without guarantees, a truth without shelter. He realized that wisdom is not simply the accumulation of knowledge, but the ability to navigate the consequences that knowledge reveals. Even the smallest details of life held lessons. He observed the patterns of birds in flight, the way their wings sliced the air with precision, carrying them to unseen destinations. He studied the flow of rivers, the patient carving of valleys over centuries, and he saw in them a reflection of the slow, inevitable progression of time and fate. In the songs of wolves, he heard lessons in cooperation and cunning. In the silence of mountains, he understood endurance and patience. Nature, in its unrelenting impartiality, became both teacher and mirror. The runes, those intricate symbols of hidden power, became central to his understanding. Each rune was more than a letter or a sound. It was a doorway, a key to the forces that shaped the universe. To read a rune was to converse with existence itself, to perceive the strands of reality intertwined with thought and intention. Odin practiced tirelessly, tracing their lines and curves with care, meditating on their meanings, and testing their power through action and reflection. He discovered that some runes could heal, others could harm. Some could inspire, others could confuse. The responsibility of their use weighed upon him, for to Odin's travels also brought him into contact with mortals, whose lives were brief yet rich with meaning. Among kings he saw ambition tempered by fear, leadership tested by the weight of decisions that affected countless lives. Among warriors he witnessed courage intertwined with folly, bravery shadowed by impulsiveness. Among the poor and the forgotten, he saw resilience, ingenuity, and the quiet strength of those who survive through sheer will. Each encounter deepened his understanding of the human condition, reinforcing the lesson that wisdom must be grounded not only in knowledge, but in empathy, in the capacity to understand the joys, fears, and struggles of others. In the halls of the Aesir, Odin observed the tension between order and chaos. The gods, mighty though they were not immune to flaws, to rivalries, and to the subtle manipulations that power inevitably attracts. He learned to navigate these currents, to discern truth from deception, to recognize the motives hidden behind words and actions. Odin saw that wisdom is often tested not in solitude, but in interaction. That the ability to act with discernment in complex social landscapes is as crucial as knowledge of the cosmos. His relationship with Loki, the Trickster, was a constant source of challenge and insight. Loki embodied chaos, unpredictability, and the subversion of expectations. Where Odin sought knowledge and foresight, Loki delighted in disruption and revelation through provocation. Yet in their interactions, Odin discovered that wisdom often requires patience, adaptability, and the ability to embrace paradox. He saw that the world is not merely a place of straightforward truths, but a tapestry of contradictions, where apparent mischief can reveal deeper understanding, and where apparent order can conceal hidden dangers. Odin's pursuit of wisdom was not limited to observation and contemplation. It demanded experience, risk, and courage. He tested himself against riddles, illusions, and challenges set by gods, giants, and spirits alike. Some of these trials involved cunning and intellect, others required endurance and sacrifice. Each victory, each failure, contributed to a growing reservoir of insight, reinforcing the lesson that true understanding is forged through action as much as reflection. Yet, even as he grew in wisdom, Odin remained acutely aware of its burdens. Knowledge is not a shield, nor is it a comfort. It is a responsibility that shapes the way one interacts with the world. He understood the loneliness of foresight, the isolation of knowing truths that others cannot perceive or comprehend. To carry wisdom is to carry a weight that is often invisible to those around you, and Odin bore it with a mixture of resolve and humility. He walked among mortals and gods alike, a solitary figure whose presence was at once guiding and enigmatic, teaching through example as much as through words. Through all his trials and observations, Odin came to appreciate the delicate balance between action and restraint. Wisdom is not simply the ability to act with knowledge, but the understanding of when to act and when to wait. In every decision, he considered consequences that stretched far beyond the immediate, recognizing that the ripple of one choice can extend through countless lives and across generations. This understanding made him not only a seeker of knowledge, but a guardian of the world's fragile equilibrium, a silent steward whose insight shaped outcomes in ways both visible and unseen. He wandered through the realms of the living and the dead, absorbing lessons from the past, the present, and the glimpses of possible futures. He learned that suffering can teach endurance, that joy can teach gratitude, and that uncertainty is the constant companion of all beings, mortal or divine. In this recognition, he found a measure of peace, tempered by the awareness that the pursuit of wisdom is endless, a journey without a final destination. And so Odin continued, the wanderer, the student of existence, the god who had paid the ultimate price for insight. Each encounter, each challenge, each reflection was another step along a path that stretched beyond the horizon of comprehension. He carried the knowledge of the cosmos within him, the lessons of mortality and divinity intertwined, and he moved through the world with the quiet authority of one who understands both the beauty and the peril of knowing. The sacrifice of his eye, the endurance upon Yggdrasil, the mastery of the runes, all these were not endpoints, but milestones, markers along the endless journey of understanding. Odin's wisdom, profound and multifaceted, was never static. It evolved as he evolved, as the worlds around him shifted and changed. He knew that to remain truly wise is to remain curious, vigilant, and open to the lessons hidden in every moment. The pursuit of knowledge is not a task with a conclusion, but a living, breathing process, one that demands courage, humility, and the willingness to confront truths that may unsettle or terrify. Odin embraced this path fully, a testament to the enduring power and peril of seeking to see beyond what is immediately visible. Even now, as the winds of time whisper through the branches of Yggdrasil, as mortals carve stories into stone and memory, Odin's presence lingers in the spaces between knowledge and mystery. He is a reminder that wisdom is not a destination, but a journey, that the search for truth is inseparable from the sacrifices it demands, and that to seek understanding is to accept the weight of both illumination and shadow. In Odin, the wanderer, the seeker, the all-seeing, we glimpse the eternal truth, that the cost of wisdom is great, yet the rewards, the clarity, the insight, the capacity to navigate the world with understanding are profound, shaping not only the god who bears them, but the world itself. Part 4. The Trickster's Mask. He was a god who walked among men and monsters alike, yet never truly belonged to any of them. Odin, the Allfather, wore many masks, and none of them revealed the whole truth. He was a wanderer, a seeker, and above all, a master of the hidden paths of the world. To call him a trickster is to only glimpse one corner of his vast mind, yet it is a corner that illuminates everything about his nature. In the twilight of the ancient worlds, Odin moved like a shadow between light and dark, between knowledge and deception, weaving schemes that shaped gods and men without them ever suspecting the threads that tied their fates together. He was both the whisperer in the meadows and the storm in the mountains, and wherever he tread, the world shifted subtly, as if acknowledging his passage with a shiver that ran through trees, rivers, and stones alike. Odin understood that truth was rarely simple, that power often wore the guise of surrender, and that knowledge was not a gift to be given lightly. He traded in riddles and half-truths, in promises wrapped in uncertainty, and in acts that left both awe and fear in their wake. The stories that survived were fragments, scattered across the sagas and runes, each one a reflection of a god who never allowed himself to be pinned down. He would approach mortals in the guise of a weary traveler, offering advice, asking questions, or testing courage. Sometimes he appeared as a beggar with a crooked staff, other times as a shadowy stranger whose eyes held the flicker of fire and the weight of the cosmos. Those who met him rarely left unchanged. Some were enlightened, some broken, and some cursed, all carrying a piece of his essence that they could neither name nor escape. He had a particular fondness for challenges, for the intricate dance of intellect and cunning. Battles were not only fought with sword and shield, but with words, riddles, and unseen forces that could topple kings as easily as he toppled forests in his wanderings. Loki, the god of mischief, often mirrored Odin's cunning, yet even the trickster could not match the depth of his design. Where Loki was chaotic, impulsive, and reveling in the immediate consequences of his schemes, Odin's plans stretched across lifetimes, across generations, entwining human and divine fate in patterns that only he could fully read. It was said that even the wisest of mortals, when faced with his riddles or his masked interventions, would pause, realizing too late that they were actors in a drama whose script had already been written by the Allfather's hand. Yet Odin was not cruel merely for amusement. Every deception, every test had a purpose. He sought wisdom above all, and he believed that true understanding came at a price. Men and gods alike learned the bitter truth that knowledge was not given freely, and that the path to insight was often paved with confusion, sacrifice, and suffering. In a sense, he was a mirror for humanity itself, reflecting their desires, their fears, their capacity for both brilliance and folly. When a mortal stumbled through one of his trials, they discovered hidden strengths, or perhaps the weakness that would define the rest of their days. When a god misstepped, they were reminded that even immortals were not beyond the reach of consequence. In this way, Odin's trickery was never random. It was a teaching, a way to push the world toward balance, toward understanding, toward the inevitable confrontation with fate that awaited all beings. The landscapes through which he wandered became a theater for his lessons. In the cold mists of Jotunheim, among giants whose thoughts were as wide as mountains, he tested patience and wit. In the roaring halls of Asgard, he maneuvered through disputes and ambitions, shaping alliances and rivalries in ways that left other gods suspecting, yet never fully perceiving, the full scope of his influence. And in the quiet villages of men, he appeared at twilight, a subtle presence that could alter a life with a single word, a single glance, a single choice made under his subtle manipulation. Some claim to have glimpsed him as a flicker at the edge of vision, a shadow slipping between trees, while others swore he had walked among them, leaving a trail of insight, confusion, and sometimes tragedy. He was omnipresent without being seen, a paradox that defined his existence as much as his wisdom did. He delighted in the unexpected. In one story, he appeared to a king as a humble traveler, asking for a meal. The king, thinking him insignificant, refused. Odin, with the faintest trace of amusement, disappeared into the shadows and later returned under the guise of a wealthy merchant, offering gold in exchange for counsel. The king, greedy and flattered, accepted, only to find himself drawn into a chain of events that led to the loss of his throne. Odin's lesson was subtle, yet profound. Pride and greed cloud perception, and the eyes of the Allfather see through every mask, every pretense. And yet, he was not a mere punisher. In other encounters, he granted gifts of insight, moments of clarity that could change a life forever. His interventions were not predictable, for a lesson that is expected is rarely learned. Odin's cunning extended beyond mortals. Even the gods themselves were wary of his mind. In Asgard, disputes arose over power, honor, and alliances with the Vanir, the other pantheon of gods. While others relied on force or intimidation, Odin relied on foresight, manipulation, and subtle persuasion. A word here, a gesture there, a carefully placed rumor or tale, and the outcome could be altered without a sword ever being drawn. He understood that true influence was invisible, that a hand guiding events unseen was far stronger than one raised openly in battle. And yet, he was never above direct action when necessary. His presence in war was both inspiring and terrifying, for he could appear suddenly, leading armies or striking down the unwary with a precision that seemed preordained. Some wondered if he was ever truly loyal, if there was a part of him bound to no one, not even to his fellow gods. And perhaps that was the point. Odin's loyalty was to the greater pattern, to the pursuit of wisdom and the balance of the cosmos. Personal attachments were secondary, fleeting distractions in the grand narrative he sought to understand. This detachment allowed him to act freely, to move among gods and men without bias, always testing, always seeking, always shaping. It was this quality that made him a god unlike any other, simultaneously revered, feared, and misunderstood. Through all of his wanderings, Odin's eyes were ever watchful, for he knew that the threads of fate were delicate, easily broken by ignorance or arrogance. He moved to correct errors before they rippled too far, but always in ways that maintained the illusion of choice for those affected. A hero might think they had won through courage alone, not realizing that every challenge had been orchestrated, every obstacle carefully placed to ensure the growth of insight or the revelation of character. This was his gift and his burden, to be the silent hand guiding destinies without ever being recognized, to carry the weight of knowledge that no one else could bear, to live eternally aware of the fragility of all things. Odin's shape-shifting abilities reflected the fluidity of his mind. He could become anything, anyone at will, not simply for concealment, but as a method of perception. To truly understand a world, He had to experience it from all angles, to inhabit the forms of the weak, the powerful, the foolish, and the wise. Each form granted him insight, each disguise revealed hidden truths, and yet he never lost himself entirely. Beneath every mask, every guise, the one-eyed god remained, watching, learning, and planning, the eternal wanderer whose journey through the cosmos was far from complete. Part 5. War, Poetry, and Death. The wind carried with it the echoes of battles long past, drifting over hills and forests where mortal feet once ran in panic and courage alike. Odin's presence was not merely a shadow over the living, but an active force in shaping the stories of those who dared to confront fate. The warriors who died in his name or by his will became more than flesh. They were symbols, threads woven into the fabric of the cosmos, their courage immortalized through the sacred songs of skalds. Each fallen soldier, whether king or commoner, contributed to a narrative that transcended individual glory. In this, Odin's interest was not in death itself, but in what it revealed, the essence of human spirit under the pressure of mortality, the flame of ambition that refused to be snuffed by the inevitability of the grave. Valhalla's halls rang with the clash of steel and the roar of exertion, but there was also a strange serenity to the scene, a harmony that only a god of Odin's wisdom could perceive. The Einherjar trained ceaselessly, each movement a study in precision and resilience. They were warriors refined through repetition, their bodies hardened, their minds sharpened by discipline and by the ever-present awareness that their purpose was not simply to fight, but to embody the eternal principles of courage, honor, and sacrifice. Every drill, every mock engagement, every echo of iron striking iron was a lesson, a preparation for the final confrontation at Ragnarok. Yet even within this relentless preparation, Odin's eye never wavered from the subtleties of mortal behavior. He watched how men grappled with fear, how they sought glory without surrendering wisdom, how they wrestled with ambition and humility in equal measure. In observing, he taught. In teaching, he shaped the destiny of the worlds. Berserkers, the fierce and enigmatic warriors whose rage was both feared and revered, held a special place in Odin's design. To enter the berserker trance was to relinquish the individual self and become a vessel for something far greater, raw, unbridled force that mirrored the chaotic energy of the cosmos. Yet this frenzy was not mindless. Beneath the surface, it carried purpose, an instinctive alignment with the principles Odin sought to illuminate. In their uncontrollable fury, the berserkers demonstrated a fundamental truth. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Their bodies became instruments of divine philosophy, their blood-soaked hands and wild eyes a testament to the interwoven nature of violence and meaning. And as they rampaged through battlefields, Odin's gaze lingered, noting each choice, each moment of instinct, each heartbeat where mortal impulse intersected with divine design. The relationship between war and poetry became increasingly evident as one considered the skalds, those immortalizers of deeds through verse. Poetry was not simply entertainment. It was the vessel through which memory endured, the medium by which mortal actions were transformed into eternal truths. Odin, as the patron of poets, understood this with unparalleled clarity. The mead of poetry, a gift stolen from the giants, was more than a metaphor. It was a bridge connecting mortal struggle to divine contemplation. Through poetry, the courage of warriors could be grasped, comprehended, and carried forward into the consciousness of future generations. Without it, even the most heroic deeds might vanish into obscurity, leaving only the hollow echo of mortality. It was in these moments, amidst training and celebration, that the duality of Odin revealed itself most starkly. He was a god of war, yes, but also a god of reflection, of insight, of profound awareness of the human condition. He demanded sacrifice, yet he offered understanding. He observed death, yet he nurtured life through the wisdom it conferred. This duality extended into every aspect of his interactions with both gods and mortals. His strategies in war were not merely tactical. They were lessons in ethics, in psychology, in the subtle balance between cunning and honor. Every battlefield was a classroom, every skirmish a teaching moment, every defeat an opportunity for growth. The Einherjar themselves were living paradoxes. Chosen for their valor in death, they embodied ideals that mortals could only glimpse in fleeting moments. Yet, even in immortality, they were not static. Their training, their struggles, their conversations, and their feats in mock battle allowed them to evolve, to deepen their understanding of courage and consequence. Odin's influence was the thread binding them to purpose, yet he permitted autonomy, for he understood that true wisdom arises not from compulsion, but from choice exercised under pressure. Each warrior, aware of his place in the grand narrative, faced the tension between individual desire and cosmic necessity, a tension that mirrored the very human struggle between self-interest and duty. It was within these dynamics that the artistry of war became apparent. Every movement, every tactic, every strategy on the battlefield was part of a larger design orchestrated by the Allfather. Odin did not simply demand victory. He valued the insight gained through conflict. Battles became a lens through which both mortals and gods could examine themselves, understand their strengths, confront their weaknesses, and ultimately refine their essence. He inspired poets to capture these lessons so that even those who never fought could learn from the courage and wisdom of those who did. The mead of poetry, in particular, functioned as an extension of Odin's consciousness, allowing human expression to carry his teachings across generations. Skalds, seated in the flickering light of hearths or the grandeur of kings' halls, recited stories not merely for entertainment, but to forge connections between individual action and universal truth. Through these verses, the deeds of warriors were immortalized, their lessons absorbed by listeners who might never face the heat of combat, but could understand the discipline, the courage, and the sacrifice it demanded. Odin's influence, therefore, extended beyond the battlefield, permeating the culture, shaping philosophy, and ensuring that the ideals he cherished endured long after mortal bodies had crumbled to dust. Death, in the eyes of Odin, was not the end, but a transformation. Every warrior who fell, every king who met his fate on the field, every poet whose voice immortalized struggle, contributed to the intricate web of existence. Mortality itself was sacred, precisely because it demanded meaning. Life without the shadow of death would have been hollow, a series of actions without consequence, a song without resonance. Odin understood that the human confrontation with impermanence was the ultimate teacher, the crucible in which courage, wisdom, and honor were tested and refined. In this way, the god's fascination with mortality was not morbid, but instructive, for in observing the fleeting lives of mortals, he discerned eternal truths about existence, choice, and responsibility. Even within the halls of Valhalla, where the dead trained and celebrated, Odin's subtle hand was ever present. He guided without overt interference, influenced without dictating, and observed without judgment. The Einherjar were free to act, yet every decision resonated within the framework of his vision. Through this delicate interplay, Odin demonstrated that the ultimate wisdom lay not in control, but in guiding potential toward purpose. Mortal courage, when acknowledged and refined, became a mirror of divine principle, a testament to the interdependence of human and godly endeavor. As the seasons shifted across Midgard, the activities within Valhalla reflected not only the preparation for the inevitable Ragnarok, but also the philosophical meditation on life, death, and the enduring spirit. Warriors practiced endlessly, but they also told stories, sang songs, debated strategy, and reflected on the lessons of past conflicts. Through these rituals, Odin ensured that valor was not simply brute force, but conscious action guided by insight. His understanding of human nature, of fear, ambition, love, and rage allowed him to cultivate warriors who were not only fierce, but wise, capable of facing the end of the world with clarity and purpose. Odin's approach to war was paradoxical, blending the physical and spiritual, the temporal and eternal. To fight was necessary, but to understand the meaning of fighting was even more critical. Every clash of swords, every charge across the field, every calculated risk taken by a mortal or immortal participant carried lessons far beyond the immediate. Courage and sacrifice were measured not solely by victory, but by comprehension, the ability to discern why one fought, for whom one fought, and what could be learned in the aftermath. In this, Odin's teaching was both profound and practical, grounding the mystical in the tangible and the abstract in lived experience. The Einherjar, in their tireless training and reflection, embodied the synthesis of philosophy and action. They were living examples of how mortal effort, when guided by understanding, could transcend mere survival to become an expression of universal principle. Odin watched over them as a gardener might watch a carefully cultivated orchard, allowing growth, pruning excess, and ensuring that each individual reached the full potential of their nature. In this, war became not a chaotic frenzy, but a disciplined study of life, mortality, and the eternal interplay of forces beyond human comprehension. Through it all, Odin's fascination with humanity persisted. He did not seek to dominate or destroy, but to observe, to inspire, to elevate. He was present in every heartbeat of courage, every whispered verse of poetry, every calculated maneuver in battle, shaping a reality where mortal lives, though fleeting, carried profound meaning. In his gaze, the struggles of men and women were sacred, their triumphs and failures equally instructive, and their existence an essential note in the cosmic symphony. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the golden floors of Valhalla, one could sense the weight of the god's presence. He was there not as a tyrant, but as a witness and guide, silently preparing his chosen warriors for the inevitable dawn of Ragnarok. Every training session, every feast, every story recited in the halls was part of an intricate orchestration that transcended time, mortality, and even the gods themselves. In this eternal preparation, Odin revealed the true philosophy of life and death, that courage, wisdom, and sacrifice were inseparable, that mortal existence gained its deepest meaning through confrontation with the inevitable, and that even in the shadow of the end, the spirit could endure, immortalized through deeds, memory, and song. Part VIC, The Shadow of Ragnarok. The world of the gods, shimmering and eternal though it seemed, was never immune to the inexorable pull of time and destiny. Odin, the Wanderer, the Allfather, knew this better than any of the Aesir. From the moment he hung upon Yggdrasil, the world tree, pierced by his own spear, eyes staring into the heart of the cosmos, he glimpsed not only the secrets of the runes, but also the inexorable approach of the end, Ragnarok. The doom of gods, the final twilight, whispered to him through the wind, through the murmurs of the Norns, who spun the fates of all living things with quiet inevitability. He, who had mastered wisdom at the price of sight, who had drunk deeply of knowledge in the well of Mimir, could not avert this end, but he sought to understand it, to prepare for it, to confront it as only the Allfather could. The signs were subtle, yet persistent. The sun and moon faltered in their courses, wolves in pursuit of celestial bodies. The earth quaked and moaned, seas roared with an unnatural fury, and fire and frost began their eternal duel across the realms. Odin's hall, Valhalla, stood ready to receive the chosen, the warriors who had died bravely in battle. Yet even in this hall of honor, he felt the heavy weight of inevitability. His mind, restless as ever, drifted beyond the revelry of the Einherjar to the deeper currents of fate. He could hear the whispers of Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, coiling and uncoiling with restless anticipation beneath the waves, while Fenrir, his terrible son, gnawed at his fetters, the chains forged by the gods themselves, the threads of destiny, intertwined in patterns even he could scarcely comprehend, yet he studied them relentlessly. For even a god must learn to face the inevitable with knowledge and courage. In the days leading to the twilight, Odin walked among the realms in his guise as a wanderer, a lone traveler with hood drawn and spear in hand. Mortals often glimpsed him and whispered of a strange traveler who questioned the heart of kings, who spoke in riddles and vanished before answers were found. He visited the halls of men, listening to tales of courage and folly. For every mortal deed, every act of bravery or deceit, was a thread in the web that led to Ragnarok. He observed the skalds and poets, the storytellers who captured the essence of heroism and doom. For through their words, the Allfather could foresee echoes of the end. In the quiet moments of the night, sitting by the flickering flames, he pondered the cycles of existence. Life and death, creation and destruction, joy and sorrow, all were but reflections of the endless dance of time. And in this dance, he saw his own role as guide, as teacher, as warrior, and as witness to the culmination of all things. Yet Odin did not approach the twilight with despair. He understood that endings were also beginnings, that destruction bore the seeds of renewal. He gathered his champions, the Einherjar, in Valhalla, training them with ceaseless dedication. They were the finest warriors the realms had ever seen, each chosen for courage, loyalty, and honor. They feasted and fought, honing skills that would one day be tested in the great battle. And he, standing above them, cloak billowing and spear raised, felt both pride and sorrow. He knew many would fall, that the paths of fate were unyielding, yet he also knew that their courage, their defiance in the face of doom, was the true essence of heroism. In these warriors, the echoes of mortal strength merged with divine purpose, creating a force that, though ultimately mortal, would challenge the very designs of fate itself. The forces that would march against the gods were gathering in hidden corners of the world. Loki, ever the trickster and agent of chaos, had sown discord, and his children, monsters of legend and terror, prepared to claim their place in the unfolding drama. Giants stirred in their frost-bound halls, dragons slumbered in their mountain lairs, and the shadows whispered among the forests and fjords. Odin, the god who sought knowledge above all, sensed the inevitable collision. And yet, he did not waver. He had walked the path of suffering and enlightenment. He had sacrificed and questioned. He had sought wisdom even when it meant losing himself. The coming storm, no matter how fierce, was but another test of understanding, another chapter in the endless saga that he alone could witness fully. For his mind spanned realms, and his heart, though heavy, beat with unyielding resolve. In the final hours, Odin retreated to the highest branches of Yggdrasil, where the winds spoke in tongues older than memory, and the stars themselves trembled. He called to his brothers, though many had fallen to time or betrayal, and he summoned the spirits of those who had once walked beside him in council and battle. The leaves of the great tree whispered their secrets, and the runes shimmered with ancient light. In this sacred communion, he understood the nature of courage and despair, of love and loss, of beginnings and endings intertwined. He realized that even in the face of annihilation, there was purpose, and that knowledge itself, even if it could not prevent the end, was a form of triumph. The battle finally erupted as the skies darkened and the seas roared. Fire and frost, chaos and order, collided in a symphony of destruction. Giants clashed with gods, serpents writhed through the waves, and Fenrir broke free of his bonds, roaring a terrible song of liberation. Odin led the charge, his spear Gungnir shining like a shard of the cosmos, his one eye blazing with the light of uncounted truths. He struck down foes with precision and valor, yet he knew that no victory could be absolute. Even as he felled monsters and giants alike, he understood that each swing brought him closer to his own end. And in this knowledge, there was a solemn grace. He faced the inevitable with eyes unclouded, courage unwavering, and heart steadfast. When the final clash came, Odin met Fenrir, his son, in a confrontation both tragic and inevitable. The jaws of destiny opened, and despite all his wisdom and might, he was consumed. Yet in that consumption, he became more than a god. He became legend, memory, and enduring symbol. For even in death, he ensured the cycle would continue. The fire and ice would wane, the old world would fall, and from its ashes, a new world would rise. The seeds of creation, sown in sacrifice and struggle, would give birth to life once more, and the memory of the Allfather, of the Wanderer and Trickster, would echo through time and space, shaping the hearts and minds of mortals and gods alike. And so, as the last embers of the old world faded and the dawn of the new approached, Odin's legacy endured. He was the god who sought understanding, the wanderer who bore witness, and the trickster who challenged the boundaries of reality. His story was not one of simple triumph or defeat, but of the eternal pursuit of wisdom, of the courage to confront the unknown, and of the recognition that even in the twilight of gods, life, meaning, and hope persisted. The world would rise again, shaped by the echoes of his deeds, and in every shadow, every whisper of wind, and every tale told by mortals and immortals alike, the presence of Odin remained, a reminder that knowledge, courage, and the relentless quest for understanding are the truest forms of immortality. Part 7. Legacy of the Wanderer. The world of the gods, shimmering and eternal though it seemed, was never immune to the inexorable pull of time and destiny. Odin, the Wanderer, the Allfather, knew this better than any of the Aesir. From the moment he hung upon Yggdrasil, the world tree, pierced by his own spear, eyes staring into the heart of the cosmos, he glimpsed not only the secrets of the runes, but also the inexorable approach of the end, Ragnarok. The doom of gods, the final twilight, whispered to him through the wind, through the murmurs of the Norns, who spun the fates of all living things with quiet inevitability. He, who had mastered wisdom at the price of sight, who had drunk deeply of knowledge in the well of Mimir, could not avert this end, but he sought to understand it, to prepare for it, to confront it as only the Allfather could. The signs were subtle, yet persistent. The sun and moon faltered in their courses, wolves in pursuit of celestial bodies. The earth quaked and moaned, seas roared with an unnatural fury, and fire and frost began their eternal duel across the realms. Odin's hall, Valhalla, stood ready to receive the chosen, the warriors who had died bravely in battle. Yet even in this hall of honor, he felt the heavy weight of inevitability. His mind, restless as ever, drifted beyond the revelry of the Einherjar to the deeper currents of fate. He could hear the whispers of Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, coiling and uncoiling with restless anticipation beneath the waves, while Fenrir, his terrible son, gnawed at his fetters, the chains forged by the gods themselves, the threads of destiny, intertwined in patterns even he could scarcely comprehend, yet he studied them relentlessly. For even a god must learn to face the inevitable with knowledge and courage. In the days leading to the twilight, Odin walked among the realms in his guise as a wanderer, a lone traveler with hood drawn and spear in hand. Mortals often glimpsed him and whispered of a strange traveler who questioned the heart of kings, who spoke in riddles and vanished before answers were found. He visited the halls of men, listening to tales of courage and folly. For every mortal deed, every act of bravery or deceit was a thread in the web that led to Ragnarok. He observed the skalds and poets, the storytellers who captured the essence of heroism and doom. For through their words, the Allfather could foresee echoes of the end. In the quiet moments of the night, sitting by the flickering flames, he pondered the cycles of existence. Life and death, creation and destruction, joy and sorrow, all were but reflections of the endless dance of time. And in this dance, he saw his own role as guide, as teacher, as warrior, and as witness to the culmination of all things. Yet Odin did not approach the twilight with despair. He understood that endings were also beginnings, that destruction bore the seeds of renewal. He gathered his champions, the Einherjar, in Valhalla, training them with ceaseless dedication. They were the finest warriors the realms had ever seen, each chosen for courage, loyalty, and honor. They feasted and fought, honing skills that would one day be tested in the great battle. And he, standing above them, cloak billowing and spear raised, felt both pride and sorrow. He knew many would fall, that the paths of fate were unyielding, yet he also knew that their courage, their defiance in the face of doom, was the true essence of heroism. In these warriors, the echoes of mortal strength merged with divine purpose, creating a force that, though ultimately mortal, would challenge the very designs of fate itself. The forces that would march against the gods were gathering in hidden corners of the world. Loki, ever the trickster and agent of chaos, had sown discord, and his children, monsters of legend and terror, prepared to claim their place in the unfolding drama. Giants stirred in their frost-bound halls, dragons slumbered in their mountain lairs, and the shadows whispered among the forests and fjords. Odin, the god who sought knowledge above all, sensed the inevitable collision. And yet, he did not waver. He had walked the path of suffering and enlightenment. He had sacrificed and questioned. He had sought wisdom even when it meant losing himself. The coming storm, no matter how fierce, was but another test of understanding, another chapter in the endless saga that he alone could witness fully. For his mind spanned realms, and his heart, though heavy, beat with unyielding resolve. In the final hours, Odin retreated to the highest branches of Yggdrasil, where the winds spoke in tongues older than memory, and the stars themselves trembled. He called to his brothers, though many had fallen to time or betrayal, and he summoned the spirits of those who had once walked beside him in council and battle. The leaves of the great tree whispered their secrets, and the runes shimmered with ancient light. In this sacred communion, he understood the nature of courage and despair, of love and loss, of beginnings and endings intertwined. He realized that even in the face of annihilation, there was purpose, and that knowledge itself, even if it could not prevent the end, was a form of triumph. The battle finally erupted as the skies darkened and the seas roared. Fire and frost, chaos and order collided in a symphony of destruction. Giants clashed with gods, serpents writhed through the waves, and Fenrir broke free of his bonds, roaring a terrible song of liberation. Odin led the charge, his spear Gungnir shining like a shard of the cosmos, his one eye blazing with the light of uncounted truths. He struck down foes with precision and valor, yet he knew that no victory could be absolute. Even as he felled monsters and giants alike, he understood that each swing brought him closer to his own end. And in this knowledge, there was a solemn grace. He faced the inevitable with eyes unclouded, courage unwavering, and heart steadfast. When the final clash came, Odin met Fenrir, his son, in a confrontation both tragic and inevitable. The jaws of destiny opened, and despite all his wisdom and might, he was consumed. Yet in that consumption, he became more than a god. He became legend, memory, and enduring symbol. For even in death, he ensured the cycle would continue. The fire and ice would wane, the old world would fall, and from its ashes, a new world would rise. The seeds of creation, sown in sacrifice and struggle, would give birth to life once more, and the memory of the Allfather, of the Wanderer and Trickster, would echo through time and space, shaping the hearts and minds of mortals and gods alike. And so, as the last embers of the old world faded and the dawn of the new approached, Odin's legacy endured. He was the god who sought understanding, the Wanderer who bore witness, and the Trickster who challenged the boundaries of reality. His story was not one of simple triumph or defeat, but of the eternal pursuit of wisdom, of the courage to confront the unknown, and of the recognition that even in the twilight of gods, life, meaning, and hope persisted. The world would rise again, shaped by the echoes of his deeds, and in every shadow, every whisper of wind, and every tale told by mortals and immortals alike, the presence of Odin remained, a reminder that knowledge, courage, and the relentless quest for understanding are the truest forms of immortality.